which are the new projects NASA is working on?
So NASA is developing for space their own rocket. I don't know if you knew that. It's called the SLS is the new rocket. It's been in development for, I don't know, 15 years. And Boeing has the contract for the SLS. That's an in-house direct contract with Boeing. There's also an in-house direct contract with Lockheed Martin to develop the Orion capsule. So that's the new capsule. We just completed some initial testing out of our Plumbrook facility here in Cleveland for the latest Orion capsule, and there's a service module that goes along with it. Believe it or not, you should know this. The EU designed the service module that's going to fly on the next NASA launch. So look up service module, and if you look at the old Apollo missions, you'll see a capsule, and then you'll see a bunch of stuff underneath the capsule. In our trips to the moon, you'll see the lunar lander attached to the front of the capsule. And that whole combination went to the moon and back. When they got close to the Earth, they dumped the service module. They needed the service module to get to the moon and back because it had a rocket engine on it. So they needed it to do the lunar ejection from Earth gravity to Mars or to the moon. So the European Union designed the latest service module that we're going to use. Okay, then there's Boeing has their own capsule that's under a different contract mechanism, and SpaceX also has a contract for a capsule. And as you know, the next launch for astronauts to the space station is going to be in SpaceX's capsule. It was deemed operational. So then NASA has renamed their major project to Artemis. And Artemis is the NASA's overall project to get back to the moon. So the SLS might be one of the rockets that gets us there. We might buy a launch package from Elon Musk. We might buy from SpaceX, I should say, rather than necessarily Elon Musk. We might buy a launch package from Jeff Bezos, Blue Origin. We might buy a launch package from there was the combined system that Boeing and Lockheed Martin have, and I forget what the name of their company is, but we might purchase a launch system from them, although I doubt that they would be in the running because I don't think they developed a system for heavy lift, but I don't think they developed a manned system. So then Jeff Bezos' space company, and I think it's Blue Origin, was tasked under the Artemis project to design a lunar lander. The lunar lander needs to land, but it also needs to have a component that takes back off, of course, because you've got to get your astronauts back off the moon once you get them on the moon. And if you look at the photograph of what was released as Blue Origin's concept, it was very similar to it looked at first blush similar to the old Apollo. Of course, it's going to be significantly different, but that was my first blush of what it looked like. And then you had SpaceX that had the huge lunar lander that was just massive. I don't know necessarily how to talk about how that's going to work, but those are the two companies that won those contracts. We're continuing to develop rovers for the moon. We're continuing to develop photovoltaics for the moon. We're continuing to develop new rocket systems where we have, there's something called, oh boy, what's the name of the rocket? I'm trying to think of it. It's a motor. They talk about nuclear propulsion. There's other propulsion mechanisms. Again, these are all underneath the surface that you probably would never have heard about. We have a battery technology that we develop batteries at NASA Glenn. There's all kinds of infrastructure to reuse resources. So once you're in space, there is no garbage. Everything that you take with you has a useful function. So if you unwrap a sandwich and you have some plastic, it's our job to reuse that plastic because it's not trash. It's a valuable resource that you have as you get someplace. So resource utilization, both from a regolith perspective, the dirt on the moon or Mars, or any stuff that you take with you, are other projects that we're also working on. Developing oxygen, developing fuel. When we get to Mars, we actually want to develop fuel on Mars, or we only want to take the hydrogen with us because the hydrogen is very lightweight. You don't want to take the oxygen with it because it weighs 8 times more, and you might need 2 oxygens for every 1 hydrogen. It just depends on what the ratio is of a fuel that you need. So you want to be able to develop fuel someplace. We're working on new solar panels. They obviously need to be lightweight. And of course, then there's communication systems need to be developed. It's very difficult. When we were talking about going back to the moon, if you're in the wrong orientation, both with the United States or with the various satellites that we have around the world stationed on Earth, if you're behind the moon, you can't talk to anybody on Earth. And if you're in the wrong spot in your orbit, you can't talk to anybody on Earth because you can't reach one of our satellites. So communications is always a big deal.
What do you think about Elon Musk and his plan to reach the moon and Mars in a small amount of time?
Heard this. Elon Musk came to a conference that we had in 2003, 4, 5, or 6. And he announced at that conference that he was going to be on the moon by 2012. And he told us point blank at that meeting in front of, 500 people, that when we got there, when NASA got there with our astronauts, because he was going to take his own astronauts, that he would be there with the champagne to welcome us to the moon. So I just wanted to make sure that you had a perspective of what Elon Musk has promised. I think it's a few years past 2012. Elon Musk also recently went on TV and said that he's afraid that he's not going to see either people on Mars because he's not able to develop the system quick enough. So it seems like he has gotten a little bit of reality check in his head for the Mars mission. In the 10 or 12 or 15 years that we talked about, like the SLS and our capsules, where NASA was directly involved in their development, Elon Musk clearly developed a new rocket and a new capsule much quicker than we did.
What do you think about conspiracy theories like the one that claims that we never landed on the moon?
So most of the time, if I ever saw anything related to somebody saying that we are legitimately questioning whether we've been to the moon with men or not, I pretty much turned it off or threw it away. The conspiracy theories are pretty easy to disprove. We have telescopes that if you just tuned them towards the moon, you could see all the stuff we left there. It's really not hard to prove. If you, I can break it down into some of the, I think, legitimate technical questions, not legitimate questions doubting whether we were there. So when they put the flag in the ground, the flag moved. And it moved in a fashion that looked like there was wind. Of course, there wouldn't be any wind on the moon. You can watch these videos of them putting the flag in the ground, and you can watch it kind of as it sets there. But what happens is the moon moves. So I didn't know if you know this, but just like there are earthquakes, there are moonquakes. Of course, I was shocked to hear that back in like 2002 when we were planning on going back to the moon. But one of the experimental packages that we were going to quickly set up on the moon was vibration detectors for moonquakes. And we have put vibration detectors on there from the Apollo missions, by the way. That's part of one of the things that they knew. I'm not sure how they knew there were moonquakes before they were there. I'm not sure if they knew there were moonquakes. But so if you shake the bottom of a flagpole, the flag on the top will flutter. And of course, the flutter looks like there's a wind, but there really is none. There's questions about shadows and some other things, but it's false. We were there. It's pretty well documented.
After the discovery of ice on the moon and Mars, which other projects is NASA carrying on?
Many years ago, it's probably about 15 now, we detected water ice on the moon. And of course, as recently as the past couple of years, we've detected water ice on Mars. One of the jobs that we had within NASA was to eventually drive into a crater, collect the water ice, and utilize the water on the moon. It sounds simple enough when you say it, but the craters are at about, I don't know, 4 to 10 Kelvin. So that's like minus 268 degrees Celsius. You got to design a pretty robust vehicle to operate at those temperatures. One of the other things that was a difficult challenge is, of course, as soon as you touch the ice, if it isn't inside something, it sublimes. It kind of goes into space, which is why we did not think there was water ice on the moon, because the vacuum is so hard. But because some of our craters at the poles don't get any sun and the temperatures are so low, it would concentrate there. So that's one thing that I thought was kind of interesting and kind of something that we were going to get. Of course, anywhere we go in the solar system, we're going to need to collect oxygen from whatever body we land on. So that was some of the other stuff that I already talked about, a little bit of the jet engine. The rover technology and the utilization of electric power. So one of the things that we did with the Kratos vehicle that we designed, it operated, I think, on less than 7 watts. It was 7 watts? No, that's a bit small. It was less than a light bulb, I believe, is kind of what we were shooting for. And my numbers may be wrong because it might be years since I did it. But when you had a vehicle on another planet, if you can drive it around without using a lot of energy, and of course you needed to do that because there wasn't a lot of energy available. So all the technologies that we tried to develop with motors and with drive systems and either with wheels or tracked vehicles were all within the concept is it had to drive over terrain that didn't have a road, obviously, and it obviously had to do it with as little power as possible.
Se il video vi è piaciuto lasciate un mi piace e commentate dicendo cosa vi piacerebbe vedere nei prossimi video. Se non volete perdervi gli altri contenuti del canale, iscrivetevi a Tantum in Colloquio e attivate la campanella. Ci vediamo al prossimo video!